grief very well, right? We bypass it, we suppress it, we repress it, and we use all of our favorite addictions from the hard ones: alcohol, drugs, work, sex, internet, TV, um, to spirituality. Spirituality can be used to bypass. And those, some of the wonderful little aphorisms that we hear from people that in the long term may mean something, but in the moment it's like getting smacked in the face. It's like, well, at least they're not suffering now. Oh, they're in a better place. No, the better place is sitting right next to you. That's the better place. Um, and people don't really know what to say to us. We get that. Um, but the fact is, grief is a process. It's a long process, and it's not just loss of a loved one. There are many things that comprise loss: um, aging, retiring, losing a pet. That's a big one. A lot of people minimize that, but that is an important big loss. Losing a job, moving, um, uh, anything that is taking away something that we're comfortable being in relationship with or involved with is a loss, and it has to be processed. It can't be minimized. So I want to first talk from the handout that I gave you, and I should have reordered it. So we're gonna do the poem last, right? But what I want to really talk about is the bottom of page one, where it says the stages of grief. The important thing here, here is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was given credit for coming up with these stages of grief, but her research was not on those who were grieving after a loss. Her research was people that were at the end stage of life, people that had been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and what they went through from the time of the diagnosis through the process until nowadays would be entering hospice. But those stages are very relevant to any grieving process, and they're listed here. Denial, this is when it first happens. It's that shock. This is a bad dream. When am I going to wake up? This can't be happening. There's the anger. I remember when I was, I don't know, 24 or so, neighbor, a couple doors down from my parents. He had a lung cancer and he died. He was probably in his mid 40s, and I'll never forget that his wife, my parents said, "How are you doing?" She says, "I'm really angry." And I remember thinking, what the hell is she angry at? She was angry that he left her. She felt abandoned. I mean, that is a primal childhood reaction, and it's normal, right? The depression, that's the longest phase, and that could be from just profound sadness to clinical depression. It's a very long phase where we're working through what we call the untangling from what the relationship was. The bargaining. A lot of times that happens in the early stages, and it's the fantasy of, God, if only I had visited them that day, right? They'd still be here. Or if only I had told them I love them more. We call it regret, and it is a form of regret, but it's really bargaining because the fantasy is somehow they'd still be here. Or walking in the door and expecting to see your dog still laying there 2 months later, right? Just the fantasy of, again, this is a dream. Maybe if I do this, I'll wake up from this. And then the last step, which is acceptance or restoration or recovery, whatever a word wants to be used. Now, there's a word that I don't use, and that's healing. Okay, because I don't believe we ever fully heal from our losses. I think we do restore, and we do go on living, and we do experience joy again. But that piece is always going to be missing. And I've learned through my own personal experience that you basically mourn three. You mourn the loss of the loved one or the job or whatever it is that we lost. We lost the relationship that we had with the job, the loved one, the house, the city, whatever it was that we lost. And we lost the future because we're never going to have that with any of that. So it's really a trinity of loss that we have to really process through. But on the back page, this this made so much sense to me because none of these stages of grief are linear. And we all, at least I certainly did early on, think, all right, well, it's a linear process and I'm going to start here and in time I'm just going to get here and I'm going to feel better. And that is absolutely not the way grief works. But this Struba and Schutt paper, this research that they did, this is the absolute best model that I've ever seen because it's the most accurate. And that is, there's two sort of stages that we go through during the grief process, and they coined it as loss-oriented place in life and the restoration-oriented. And you notice the squiggle line between the two. Is that line straight? No. And in fact, the true line means you might be coming out of loss orientation a little bit, and then you jump back in. And then you come back out, and then you jump back in before you even touch into the restoration oriented. But to keep it general, I just kind of show the line goes that way, that way, that way, that way, because it's fairly accurate. And what is inside that loss orientation? Well, you can see it's the general definition of grief work, which is a big umbrella, right? So within that umbrella is what I call the waves, right? So, my formative years were in New Jersey. Of course, everybody's heard of the Jersey Shore. And, we used to go to Manasquan Beach and Belmar Beach. And, you go out there, and if it's a wavy day, you stand in the surf, and you don't see a wave, and you get knocked on your butt. Right? And you get up, you go back in, another wave comes in, and knocks you on your butt. And that's pretty much how the early stages of grief works, except the waves are very large and they're very close. And there's very little period between the waves. And this could be anywhere from months to the first couple of years for people, depending on a lot of other things psychologically that are going on. When we lose a loved one, it could be a close friend, obviously a spouse, parent, child, God forbid, aunts, uncles, cousins, that we had really close relationship with, the period of these close waves is going to be more intense than other losses. But that's the best metaphor that I've heard for this whole process, is getting hit with the wave. Now, as the waves begin to spread out, there's less time being knocked down. The waves will get a little less strong and will get knocked back, but not knocked down. And at some point in the process, we can go weeks, and then all of a sudden we hear a song on the radio, or we open a drawer and we find their sock, and we're done for the day, right? That's what grief looks like. So the intrusion of grief, this is, again, a thing, and we're on vacation, things are going pretty well, and all of a sudden we have a memory of an old vacation 25 years ago, and we're done for the next 2 days, right? We just got hit by a wave. And we get very frustrated. Oh, my God, I was feeling good. I'm on vacation, got away from home, so I felt some relief, and I just got knocked down. So that's what we call the intrusion of grief: birthdays, anniversaries, holidays. And everybody's different. I do a lot of work with people. Some get through the first year and go through that anniversary date, and things seem to be better going into the second year. For others, it's the reverse. What I've seemed to learn from them is that the ones that have it harder in the second year were more resistant to all of this in the first year. They were not really diving in and engaging the process. Percentage-wise, it seems like a third of the people have it harder the second year than the other 70% or so. And then we look at the restoration side. Attending to life changes. So metaphor taught to me by one of my clients, and it's brilliant. So when we lose a loved one, the brain has these neural pathways, and it's like a highway, right? So I use the example, because I'm in Atlanta, of I-85, right, going up to the northeast. And my whole life, I've always gone up I-85 to the northeast, even though I lived in New York. But for the metaphor, right? And all of a sudden we lose this loved one. It's as if a massive earthquake has opened up a mile abyss, and they will never again be able to go up I-85. Now what has to happen? They have to construct a new highway going off in the distance, way out past this giant mile deep abyss, up and around. And that's what's going on in our brains. So new neural pathways are being developed by the brain as it starts to, I hate the word new normal, but normalize what life is going to be in the future without the loved one, which is why it seems almost unfathomable early on. How can I go on living without this person? You know, we just can't even imagine that we're going to be happy again or joyful. And that is attending to the life changes. On the other side, when we bounce back into the loss-oriented, that's the breaking, the bonds, ties, and the relocation. Right? It's finding that new path that we can't even imagine until someday we get there and we look back. It's like, I can't even believe that I'm still standing, right? But we all will, right? Because there's definitely that resilient part inside our psyche that knows that's its job, is to do what's best for the psyche. Distractions are helpful unless they're all the time. So one of my clients working, and she says, I think I'm just totally bypassing. She lost her son tragically, and I said, well, tell me what you mean by that. She says, I'm watching TV all the time. So, you know, when are you watching TV? Said, like from 7:30 in the evening until 10:30 when I go to bed. I said, so what are you doing? What time do you get up in the morning? She said, well, if I sleep, well, I'm getting up at 6:30 or 7. I said, well, what are you doing during the day? Well, it's hard. I struggle. I cry a lot, but I'll still go to yoga class and I'll try to get out of the house for a walk. And I go, well, you're not distracting unhealthfully. It's actually good that you're doing that. So 3 or 4 hours of watching TV is a healthy distraction, and we need to do that. The psyche needs a break, right? We can't just always be engulfed by the grief process. We got to be able to step back. It's only a challenge, like I said, when we're doing it all the time. And there are many different ways that we bypass our grief process. Some have a stack of books, how to deal with grief, how to do this. And that's, again, fine if it's a little bit of the day. But if it becomes every time, the anxiety picks up or the depression really deepens and we run to the book and we feel a sense of relief, that's a good indication that it's a distraction. And it'd be better to put the book down and say, I'm going to carve out an hour to do this. Right? I know somebody that every morning set a timer for 30 minutes and let everything come out, screaming, yelling, throwing things across the room, and then the alarm went off. It's like, let me get on with my day. So they actually gave the reverse. They created a practice of release. John Bradshaw said many years ago in his book, Healing the Shame That Binds You, that emotion, if you separate the word E-motion, is energy in motion. And emotion is an energy. And in our culture, there's 2 emotions that particularly men are allowed to feel. Anybody know what those 2 are? Oh, yeah, that's number 1. Well, there's emotion involved with sex. No, she's right. Joy, laughter, right? They'll show that. But underneath the anger is fear, and underneath the fear is hurt. And if our culture would allow men, and it's getting much better in the younger generation, I have 3 sons and I see it in them, allow men to show their fear, which means to speak it, to be vulnerable enough to share it, and then to look below that and see where was the hurt. And it could be an original hurt from years ago, but to at least explore that, that lessens the amount of anger that gets expressed. But grief is another one. Men have to be willing to sit in the grief process. So questions about this model? You can take it away and give it a look. And then I would invite you to look back over your lives and past losses and see how this actually played out. And if you didn't follow any of this and you bypassed your grief or you repressed it, thank God I'm not the only one. right? Because for me, it took at age 55 a major traumatic loss in my life before I got it. And then everything else I hadn't dealt with also came up because that can sometimes be the unfortunate invitation that comes if we've repressed a lot of loss and we have a big one. It's as if the sewer cap got ripped off out of the basement and everything is coming up. And I encourage you never to do grief alone. You know, a psychotherapist, a clergy person, a close friend. The more we can talk about it and be held in safe space and heard, that's the path through. So I want to look at this poem. This is on the top of page 1, and then we're going to have any questions that you guys have. Somebody want to read it out loud? Is that okay? Or the people?
Absolutely. Just use the microphone.
Oh, yeah. Robin, if you don't mind.
Face the camera, please.
And not the whole thing. If somebody wants to read like one long sentence, and then we can share it.
Who wants to start? You. You'll start.
Charlotte.
Hi. Yeah, that's my better side. The title is You Don't Just Lose Someone Once. You lose them over and over. Sometimes in the same day, when the loss momentarily forgotten creeps up and attacks you from behind. Fresh waves of grief as the realization hits home. They are gone. Again. You just don't lose someone once. You lose them every time you open your eyes to a new dawn. And as you awaken, so does your memory. So does the jolting bolt of lightning that rips into your heart. They are gone again. Losing someone is a journey, not a one-off. There is no end to the loss. There is only a learned skill on how to stay afloat and when it washes over. Be kind to those who are sailing this stormy sea. They have a journey ahead of them and a daily shock to the system each time they realize they are gone again. You don't just lose someone once. You lose them every day for a lifetime.
Thank you for that. Yeah, if you found sadness coming up, that's a good thing. That's some of your own grief that is just rising up to the surface. That's a beautiful thing. You should never hide from that. This poem was written by a woman who lost her son, shared with me by a woman who lost her son. So as the great prophet Jerry Garcia once said, if I knew the way, I would show you home. So nobody knows, there's no secret path home, and that's through this process. There's only engaging in the walk, and it is a hell of a walk. As I know everybody in this room has experienced big losses, I can tell. We're all in the same age bracket, except for the young guy running the board in the back. But he'll get there. So, questions, anything? Yeah, if you do, we've got a mic.
I don't mean to take up all your time. However, I did work with a grief counselor in our crisis unit, and he reminded me that the grief that we feel is also about change, the change that we experience.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Other questions, comments?
I think I'm the oldest one in the room. It's not always fun. And I want to be very grateful and know that when we have our issues, that our church family comes to our rescue. I particularly want to thank Rachel for being my wheels, Rick for being my muscle, and helping me make changes to adapt to aging. And when I lost my grandson about 3 years ago, I also lost my daughter because in her grief, she couldn't share with me. And just recently, she came to visit, and it was so wonderful to have her back.
Thanks for that. Grief is messy work. Well, we just want them to hear.
Talk over there? Now I forgot what I was going to say. Well, I guess we do lose them every day, but I try to, I don't know if I'm fooling myself, but I was thinking about my dad, Father's Day, so that makes me cry. But I started thinking that part of me says I lost him, but another part says no. No, he's here with me, and he never left. So I don't know if that's rationalization.
No, that's actually real.
Yeah.
Right there, the psyche has a multiplicity of parts to it, which is a beautiful thing, right? So yeah, there is a part inside all of us that knows we've only lost them in the physical world, right? We're always connected to our loved ones in the spiritual realm, whatever that is to us, right? So that's all that's going on. One part of you deeply misses him or them, and another part knows they're not gone. That's a very important distinction to get, especially early on. Is you've just lost them in the physical world.
That reminds me of something. That is, I don't know if on my Facebook page I have Matt Frazier, and I like it every time I listen. But that to me helps me so much because he's communicating with people's spiritual beings that are no longer in the physical and telling them things that he wouldn't know because it's not out on any place where he could find it. But it helps people heal. He brings such healing to people. He calls himself a psychic medium, and he's a psychic medium, and he really is. It runs in his family, and he is so amazing. I find myself spending a lot of time on days I feel like doing nothing, just looking at him, and I sometimes cry, and I'm so happy for these people because they get closure, and they know, and I personally have had experiences with, that I won't go into, for myself, on knowing that these beings, pets, as I was bawling about Buddy last year showing up, helped me grieve about 10 days after. Anyway, spirit, nobody's gone. They're just out of sight. They're not out of mind. When you think of them, they're there with you, according to what he's saying, according to my experience. And it's still sad. I still get sad, but it feels better. It's a better feeling sad, if that makes any sense. You know.
And you also know, because I know my parents, they'd be like, stop it, everything's fine, everything's great. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, they'll communicate if you're open to it. You'll hear it if you're open to know it.
Yeah.
You'll hear it, you'll feel it.
Mm-hmm. Couple more questions? Okay. All right, good. Okay, so there and then.
My husband died about 3.5 years ago, and I spent a lot of time crying. But on the anniversary of his death, which was September 29th, I used to always light a candle and then talk to him and tell him how much I loved him. And then I would cry and cry and cry and cry and cry. Well, this past September, it didn't happen. And I don't know what it means, but I feel okay. I still walk around the house and look at his picture and talk to him and tell him I love him. So I think there's been some healing there.
What she just shared is exactly what grief looks like, and it's evidence of the restoration period. Eventually, we get to that place where something that made us cry at the thought of them no longer brings up the tears. Sometimes with people that brings up what we call a secondary guilt. Like, how can I possibly feel okay they're gone? That's what's supposed to happen, right? And again, the recognition that they're really not gone, but I'm here, right? And I'm in the restoration phase. And I would encourage you to continue to light the candle on that anniversary for the rest of your days on the planet. It's one of the beautiful things that Judaism offers in its grief rituals, besides the full 1 year of saying a particular prayer every day, which keeps us engaged in the process. You don't go back to work after 7 days like nothing happened. Is lighting a memorial candle every year on the anniversary. But then also celebrating their birthday. I encourage that as well. Or making a donation to a cause that they loved on their birthday so that we can transform it to celebrating the life they lived while they were here, while honoring the day that they transitioned to the realm.
I have a question. I lost my dad.
It's okay.
It was February 22nd of years ago. And when I think of him, I always think of the fun stuff, the joy, the laughter. I don't think of any of the hard times that we might have had. And it's always the good things. And I'll look down at my clock and it'll say 2:22 or 11:22. The number 22 is always popping up. And I always say, "Hey, Daddy, how you doing?"
Beautiful.
And just thank him for watching over me and Jeff. Is that like normal just to do
Yes.
that?
Yes.
So I'm not crazy?
No.
Okay, now we know. Now we know.
You don't know how many people have called me and said, I talked to their pictures. Am I going nuts? It's like, no, you're maintaining the relationship. That's a beautiful thing. I lost my first wife 10 years ago, and she loved the Pleiades, the Seven Sister constellation.
Yeah.
In the winter, when it's up there, I say hello.
Yeah. So I'm not good. Look, I'm not crazy. Good.
You might be crazy about other things, but that's not.
Thank you, Robin. Everybody was thinking here.
Well, I want to thank
I
everyone.
wanna say one.
Okay.
So for my family, our hardest loss was in the fall of 21 when my 10-year-old nephew died from leukemia. And it's been a struggle for the extended family, but especially for his nucleus family. His older brother, his younger brother, who gave a bone marrow donation at the age of 7 to try to save his older brother. And the mom and the dad and the grandparents. It's just been really, really tough for them. And actually, I'm going to send this paper to my niece. Every year on Wyatt's birthday, they still have a party to celebrate him. And they have created a memory garden for Wyatt and a memory wall in the house where they have shelves of his favorite things. And they often talk to Emerson, his little brother, about missing Wyatt and how to move through that pain of that his big brother's not going to be here to grow up with him. So I agree with you, Mitch. Loss is a real real tough thing. And I also agree with Jeanette that together we can make it easier for each other just to be there, to hold a hand or to touch a shoulder or to listen to a story that you might have heard a dozen times before. Thank you, Mitch, for bringing this today.
Thank you, Mitch.
Let them know that these will be out in the foyer.
Okay. Yeah. So there's some other handouts will be out in the foyer, and I'd be happy to come back and talk about a much lighter topic anytime.
We would love to have you come back. Thank you, brother. That was incredible. Every generation blames the one before, and all of their frustrations come beating on your door. Know that I'm a prisoner to all my father held so dear. I know that I'm a hostage to all his hopes and fears. I just wish I could have told him in the living years. Crumpled bits of paper filled with imperfect thought, stilted conversations. I'm afraid that's all we've got. Say that you don't see it. He says it's perfect sense. You just can't get agreement in this present tense. We all talk a different language, talking in